Right, we are live. Today is October the 30th. Almost my birthday is tomorrow, the 31st. I felt that I needed to say it for the audience out there
Congratulations.
to know. So it's like a pre-birthday gift to me to have these wonderful people to talk about wonderful things. So as I was saying earlier, obviously the audience doesn't know this, but I like inviting friends and people that I know to have conversations about the work that they do and that we do to advance knowledge and advance research. And so hopefully folks out there on the planet can learn from the work that we do. And this is what I call capsulas or capsulex, however you want to call it. I always say this at the beginning because not everybody knows yet. So capsulex is because there are two words. One in Spanish is capsulas, and then in English is capsule. So I wanted to capture both um, languages. And what this means is the little pills that you take, when you are sick or when you feel like you need some nurturing for yourself. So I said these are like little capsules of information or research that can help us to nurture our spirits, our academic experience, and get to know ourselves better in the work that we do. So that being said, today, the topic for today is roughly along the lines of emotion in relation to research, to education. And we're going to talk about this more in detail in a minute because we have two wonderful people who have some experience in this topic. And I know some from their personal point of view, which I'm going to get into details in a moment. But I am happy to introduce all of you, Dr. Luis Javier Penton Herrera, not Herrera, but Herrera, I guess it should be Herrera. And he's going to tell us about where he's coming from because I cannot pronounce the place where he's coming from because he's in Rush in Polish. And then,
Polish.
yeah, and then Dr. Beksad Manzouri from the Lakeshore Foundation. That was easy for me. And then hopefully we're going to learn some things related to emotion and maybe we can get emotional if we want to or not, and why not? Right? So that being said, we're gonna open up today our panel, which each one of them telling us about themselves, who they are, where they're coming from, what is whatever you want to share about the research that you have been doing or the research that you're currently doing. So we're gonna get us started with, let's say, Luis, tell us about yourself and where you're coming from, your background, and anything that you want to share with people today.
Jesse, thank you so much. And hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Jesse, for the invitation. I did not know about your birthday tomorrow. So thank you for inviting us today and to be here in a pre-celebration conversation with you today. So yes, my name is Luis Javier Penton Herrera. Most people call me Luis. Most Spanish-speaking friends call me Javier. So anywhere in between. As I tell my students, I tell them I have four names. Choose one and call me one. I'm fine with any of the four. And but I'm currently here in Poland, and I live here in Poland. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm a full professor at, it's called Akademia Ekonomiczno-Humanistyczna w Warszawie. Yeah, and that's an institution. It's a private university here. I'm teaching English and Spanish, so they have me in the English philology department, but I'm doing a little bit of everything there with English and Spanish. And my research is situated. My research, my teaching, everything that I do is situated at the intersection of emotion, identity, well-being, everything that has to do with affective. I'm doing now agency as well. So everything that is connected with affective concerns, especially social emotional learning, that's where my research and my teaching is heading towards. And I'm very excited to be doing that work.
Thank you so much. And Bexa, what tell us about you, your background, where you're coming from, and your relationship with this topic.
Hello. First of all, congratulations, Jesse. I didn't know that it is your birthday. Give us some address at the end, and hopefully you'll get some gifts, birthday gifts. My name is Behzad Mansouri. I have a doctorate in curriculum instruction with some sort of interdisciplinary concentration on language education, language teacher education, educational research, and educational psychology. Uh, uh, I received my doctorate from the University of Alabama. and before that, a master's in educational psychology from the same university. And prior to that, I did a master's in Iran, where I'm coming from, in applied linguistics slash TESOL. My research, I have a couple of research inquiries. One of them is emotion, language learning, and language teaching, teacher identity. And I have done a little bit of research on specifically on empathy and interconnection of empathy and culture. And I'm so happy to be here and to have this opportunity to talk to you guys.
Well, thank you so much for that wonderful opening about the work that you have been doing. This is interesting work because as scholars, individuals, teachers, researchers, I have the feeling for a while that we don't talk much about emotions and feelings much, and we keep it to the sort of private or to ourselves, I guess. So, and the minute you say something in the public realm, sort of it is judging out there, unfortunately. So today I want to start with you with a little anecdote from me, and then I want to hear your answer to this idea. So yes, my name is Yesid Ortega. As some of you might know, I'm coming from Colombia in South America, and as such, Latin America, it's a very machista, chauvinistic culture, and I am a cisgender straight guy, and I lived through my younger years, I guess, when I was a teenager and going up in my young years, I guess. So we all live with this phrase or this saying in Spanish that says, nosotros los hombres lloramos por dentro, which means we, the men, we cry inside. And then you live with this idea through life. And the minute you, as a man, as a cisgender man, you show any kind of emotion, you are perceived as weak, right? As less valuable to society, because you are supposed to be this macho man in front of women, in front of your community, in front of people. And the minute you let a tear go or any kind of emotion, you are being judged for this. And for me, it has been like this since forever, but not necessarily anymore. Like if I need to express my emotions, if I need to cry in public, I'll do it. I don't feel ashamed anymore. I actually engage, and I encourage folks out there not to repress those emotions because they hurt, right? And as such, this introduction to this topic comes from this personal experience of me not being able to express any kind of emotion, and now on social media people don't necessarily express any kind of emotion because people are judging. So my question to you both is the question of the emotion first. Where do you think this sort of mindset of narrative of we cannot express emotions in public, where is this coming from? What are the layers behind of this rhetoric or sentiments or narratives or structures? And what do you both think about this?
Bessa, do you want to go first or you want me to go first?
You go ahead, Luis.
All right. So I'm thinking, and I'm gonna go a little bit. I wrote down some points that you shared, Yesid, and I'm gonna refer back to them. But I've been thinking about this. Thank you for that question. I've been thinking about this, and why have emotions always been portrayed as weak, less valuable, as you said, as something that can be judged and should be judged. And I always think back to this dichotomy between emotions and power. And this thing of power being masculine, and if you're powerful, it means that you don't have or you don't show emotions, because emotions is the opposite of being powerful, because power has always been connected to physical strength, to being able to be brutal, to be violent, all of these things that in societies traditionally, societies that have been in our background, you know, we have the colonial background, etc. You know, countries have been colonized, etc., etc. So that has been the history behind it. This idea of power, colonization. You know, you don't show emotions, you show how brutal you can be. But then the emotional side then is left as the opposite, which is weak. But then it's left to people who are not men, which is in this case will be women, right? Or men who are considered less men. And we see it in traditional, I can speak for where I was born and raised in Cuba, that if you were too empathetic as a child and you were a man, then that was not good. That was, you know, you were weak, because emotions are seen always as weak. And as you said, as less valuable, something that, and then that opens the space for everyone to judge you. But people don't judge children who are powerful, violent, who do not show emotions. Those are not judged as much, because, especially boys, because, oh no, that's what a boy is supposed to do in our society, right? It's okay for that boy to be violent and to be, but then if you're emotional, oh, there is something wrong with you, you know? So I think that perpetuation of this dichotomy of power and emotion, that's why we have this issue now with especially men in specific societies, because emotions is always cultural. But you know, the way that we perceive emotions and acceptance of emotions or not. But you know, I do think that in some societies that do not value emotions and the depiction of emotions and sharing of emotions by male individuals, you know, by men, then men then tend to be emotionally less intelligent, because they're not taught, we're not taught how to navigate emotions, how to regulate our emotions, how to understand even what an emotion is. And the fact that emotions are very, very powerful, if you can really hone that emotion and use them to your advantage. And I do this all the time. For example, I'm a runner, I love running, and I know from the moment I'm starting, I know if I have this emotion of, oh, today is not going to be a good day, you know, like I'm not feeling it that day. I'm not feeling it. I know I'm not going to be doing my best. But when I get, it's called, I don't know if you're both familiar with this, it's called runner's high. You get euphoric when you're running. I know if I'm getting those days, I know I can take advantage of that, and I make it last, and my speed increases significantly in my stamina. And, you know, my running gets much, much better. It's the same when we're taking tests, when we're doing this, you know, different parts of our lives. We can take advantage of our emotions. They can be fuel, but we haven't been taught about this. So, Jesse, I think I went beyond your question, but as you see, I'm very excited about this topic.
That's exactly the kind of conversation that we want to have in Capsulxs, to expand and dig deep into something that you cannot capture when you read a paper or read a book chapter. You know, when you go to a conference, you have these 10, 12 minutes, 15 minutes, and you have to pack everything in those minutes. And this space is precisely to allow us to go more in depth and carve in to the concepts, because I think these are important. I think that's why when I invited you both, it was like, I think emotions are important, and I think people don't talk about this much or show emotions much. And I remember, like, this weekend I went to an event, and one of the person got an award, and he said, "Oh, sorry, I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry." You know, as he was receiving the event, and I turned around and say, "No, man, I think you should cry." And everybody, "Yeah, you should cry." And then he looked around and he was like, "Oh, I guess I can cry." And he cried, right? So it got me thinking, I think we need to allow for these, especially for men, cisgender men mostly, like, to actually express those emotions, because I could tell that he wanted to cry, but he was sort of repressing it because society, right? And then a few years back, I remember on one of the conference, Nelson Flores say to Jonathan Rosa, "I love you," like in front of a lot of people. And I was like, I think we need more of these, that we can tell people, "I love you," in front of an academic audience. We need more of that. And I felt sort of proud of, like, I want to see more of that, or giving the hugs and say how much I love you. Your presentation was great. Come on, give me a hug. Yeah. So I want to see more of that. And that's why I was excited to invite you both to have that conversation. But I also want to hear from Bexar about all this conversation about emotions thus far.
So you both put it in a very, very great way. So I just don't know how I can contribute to that.
Funding.
But I'm trying to answer the question from my own personal experience, from the research that we have, all have been doing. So just like you said, and just like Luis mentioned, so emotions, again, I do believe that it is socially culturally situated, and it is, let's say, a cultural thing, and then it's a cultural expression that everybody has. But when it comes to emotion, I do believe that uh, we gotta look at it from this perspective. We cannot find anyone without emotion. Everybody has emotion. Okay. So there is this owning part or having part of the emotion, and there is this expressing part of the emotion. Back to the example that you just mentioned. Now, Nelson Flores and Jonathan Rose are in a conference. I love you. So that's the expression of emotion that we see in a public space or in a professional space. That so everybody, I think, has this emotion, but what many people, what most of us, including I myself, probably are struggling with is whether we have the space uh, to express that emotion or not. So when we think about like this, it is something like I think that you have explored in your studies and your research. You said that the spatiality or and temporality of the emotion, whether the culture that we are situated in, whether the context that we are situated in, does this culture, this context allow us to express it or not? And then again, this binary comes up, this dichotomy comes up. Men are strong or should be strong, and women, they are emotional, and most of the time, this being emotional is associated with, unfortunately, with weakness. So uh, emotion to me, again, just like I said, uh, we shouldn't, if we are gonna work on that, if we are gonna express that, if we are gonna show how powerful it can be, again, just like Luis said, we should move beyond these existing dichotomies and binaries and look at it as a phenomenon which can be helpful in what we are doing. We can be teachers, we can be learners, or we might be doing something else. Okay, but for example, in our field, when we are looking at emotion, for example, in a language classroom as a teacher, how can I, as a teacher, you as a teacher, can encompass this emotion and funnel it in order to help my classroom learn better, my kids learn better, or I, as a teacher, learn from them, something like that. Uh, I believe that you all know that there are too many studies, you know, too many studies on that, and looking into, emotional states and emotional expressions by male, female, gender binaries that we have. And most of the studies may say, okay, because of these factors, females, they are more emotional compared to men. And if you are going to go deeper to that, again, back to that notion of culture and the social structure that we are all situated in, that cultural thing or that cultural, let's say, mindset that said, okay, men should be powerful, we shouldn't express our emotions, that actually takes away the space that everybody needs to express that emotion. And that's why we see uh, some sort of, sometimes you see people break into tears because uh, the space is not provided for them and they cannot contain that kind of, high intensity emotion. Just like today, Luis said that if I'm feeling not well, that day I'm not going to run well as well. So that's something like that to me. And bottom line, I just don't want to take that much time on this question, but we got to find out how we look at emotion and to see whether we have the space to express that or not. And if we don't have that space, try to provide that space for us in our classes, in the community that we're part of it. Try to provide that space to express that emotions, because at the end of the day, it's going to help us be, let's say, better human beings, more helpful human beings, no?
And if I may, Jesse, add on, Besa, thank you so much, because what you were saying just prompted me. I'm taking notes because, I do tend to forget a lot. I'm very forgetful, but I have to take notes. And I took notes. There are 2 points that you prompted in my mind that I thought it would be important to mention here. And the first one, you mentioned this idea of moving away from dichotomies of, when it comes to emotions. And I agree 100%. And I was mentioning earlier a chapter that I finished with Anna Becker. She's wonderful, fantastic. Look into her work, by the way. And we were talking about exactly about this, the need to move away from the dichotomy of how we look at emotions, but especially, and let's go a little bit deeper, if it's okay, into applied linguistics. In applied linguistics, we have this, I don't know the word for it, but enduring, let's just say enduring dichotomy of positive and negative emotions. And I know some people are not going to be very happy with this, but I think we need to move away from cataloging or saying these are positive emotions, these are negative emotions, because then we start creating a sense of, we start creating boundaries towards specific emotions. And, oh no, these are negative emotions, you don't want to feel these emotions. No. Emotions, in my view, all of the emotions are there to help us learn something. And then what might be positive for me might not be positive for someone else. So we're also prescribing what emotions should be and should look like. So I think we should definitely stop saying positive emotions and negative emotions. And hopefully when the chapter is out, we'll be able to share what we propose, Anna Becker and I. But, so that's definitely one point that I think we should definitely move away from in applied linguistics. No emotions are positive, no emotions are negative. We say something like helpful, unhelpful emotions, or desired, undesired. So we propose specific, beneficial, not beneficial, but positive and negative, that's very, subjective. But also, what you were also sharing about, Besar, about this idea of emotions and who feels emotions. There's actually little research in our field, but a friend of mine from Iran, his name is Yasser. He invited me to collaborate with him on an article that I'm hoping is going to get published soon. And we did a quantitative study. And there was one of the findings was that gender doesn't really influence emotion labor in teachers. So, and I think we should do more research like this about, like gender and emotion labor, and whether gender really affects emotion labor or not. So in our study, we didn't find, like, for example, females, they engage in more emotional labor. No, that's false in our case. Like for us, equally, men and women engaged in emotional, this is language teachers specifically, engaged in emotional labor equally. So at the end of the day, it's not so much about the individual, but the situations and how they respond to it, but not the gender itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
go on, Besar.
I just wanted to add something else. So to me, okay, something we can conclude that emotion is relational. Again, no dichotomy, no this or that, no binary, nothing. It is relational. It is not specific to one gender or the other. So if we have, again, two genders, so again, which is again a binary, but it is relational. It is situated, and the research, we have tons of research that shows that emotion is fluid, and it can change over time and over space, and assigning positive, negative, labels and categories to that is just a matter of, again, putting them within a specific boundary. But the thing is that it doesn't fit within that specific boundary.
Yes, thank you so much. I think this is great knowledge, great ideas. Like Luis, I have also been taking notes of all that has been said. And I would say, Luis, that it, like, you're going into the right direction in pushing the boundaries and of the dichotomies of what it means to be or to have negative versus positive emotions. And as teachers, educators, researchers, we always hear about these the negatives of negative emotions, and then you have to start thinking positively on all of these. I do believe that all sorts of emotions play a role both in us as human beings, in our students, and you mentioned beside is relational with those who we engage with, and depending on the situation, depending on the context as well. That's why I truly believe what you're saying, Luis, that we don't need to see these dichotomies, but beyond that, what I call a diversity of emotions, an ecosystem of emotions, or a pluriverse of emotions in which all the emotions are equally valid. It's just depending on what is the purpose of these emotions, what are the emotions doing at particular moment, and how are these emotions affecting or not myself or affecting the other. And I think the problem, not necessarily with the negative, is just how a particular moment or situation, a certain emotion or expressing certain emotions can affect myself first and then can affect others. And I think that's the key issue here. And then, because the next question is sort of related to education, and you both have agreed that yes, emotion is always cultural, is socially constructed, and there are places and contexts in which may or may not accept the emotions of the male counterpart, for example. So I wonder, from the educational point of view, in your opinion, in your experience, what would be the role? No, I think it would be more like, should we teach emotions to students? Should we teach them how to manage the emotions? Should we teach them how to like navigate the emotions? Is it our role as teachers to actually teach them how to manage that diversity of those emotions or not? And if so, how can this be done? Because I know a lot of teachers see this live stream, and then they can take an advantage or some about your experience. What can be done? Should we push this agenda of like, oh, the boys need to be more sensitive, and then and women should be a little bit tougher? Like, what are your thoughts on this about teaching specifically emotions, controlling emotions, navigating emotions? Any initial thoughts, Luis?
Yeah, so I think this is pretty much where I'm heading with my own work with social emotional learning. And I do think I do not like prescribing specific, like boys need to be more this, girls need to be more that, but I think we should approach it more generally speaking. And this is my goal with social emotional learning. If we're not aware of what social emotional learning is, for the audience, for anyone listening, there are many definitions out there. The way that I like to think about social emotional learning, it's providing a space for learners to develop social emotional competencies, the social emotional competencies, that skills that we need to be successful in life. So that's what I call social emotional learning. And for a little bit of clarification here, social emotional learning is not supposed to be a program. It's not supposed to be a prescribed syllabi or syllabus that people take and then they start teaching. That's not supposed to. Social emotional learning is an approach. So of course, similar to emotions and everything else, it changes by context, by student, etc. Now, when I think about teaching them about emotions, I think more than anything, we should focus on emotional intelligence and emotional agility when we're thinking about teaching emotions. Not like boys need to learn about this, women need to learn, or girls need to learn about this, but in general, emotional intelligence and emotional agility need to be at the forefront of education. So emotional intelligence, giving students the opportunity to be more aware of what they feel, putting a name to what they feel, being okay with feeling what they're feeling, and then realizing that what they're feeling is data. And I always think of emotions as data for us to grow, individual data that we can use to grow as individuals. And that's my perspective in life, is that human beings were supposed to learn from our experiences, not shy away from them. And that's emotions for me. What it is emotions is a form of data that we can use to shape, to get our experience and then learn from it, grow from it. And I think I wish someone would have taught me this in school, because it has taken me all of this time to realize this and to learn this. But imagine if we're teaching children from early on, everything that's happening in life, you can take this, think about it, reflect on it, and then find a way, like, what can I ask yourself? What can I learn from this? and then use that as data to improve your life. That's how you become more emotionally intelligent. And then emotional agility is finding a way on, okay, so this happened to me, or I know this is my trigger. For example, I know if I go, I don't know, through this street, it's going to be a little bit more loud because of traffic, and then I get a little bit, agitated, and I know that's my trigger, so I'm going to take a different street to get to whatever I need to go. So emotional agility is finding ways to deal with emotions that might not be helpful for you or that you might not want in that moment, finding strategies to deal with them to become more balanced in life. And I feel that that's necessary for us in life and in society, because at the end of the day, it goes back to this idea of balance, of peace in society, in the world. And that's why we see more violence nowadays than ever, because people do not think about first what they're feeling. They don't know how to regulate their own emotions. They do not care. That's apathy. They do not care about what they do or how others feel because of their actions. So all of this goes back to people are not those type, in my view, people who are like this, then they have not had the opportunity to become emotionally intelligent. They haven't had the opportunity to develop emotional intelligence, which again creates conflict, violence, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, social emotional learning, it's about, and teaching emotions more generally, it's about making the world, the community, a better place from my perspective.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's very important what you have said. Sada, you have anything else to
Yeah,
echo what Luis has said?
that was an interesting way to put it. So I just again, like you all, I'm making notes. But so a couple of things that the highlights of what just we said: sensitivity, regulation, and so emotional data. So actually, one of the emotional data, one of the that's the main theme that Luis and I and another colleagues of us we are exploring in our hopefully upcoming edited volume. Uh, I want to add to that and then relate to what I've done. So what just Luis just mentioned, more or less, it goes in line with what I've done, empathy, research on empathy. So is it emotion teachable? Is it emotion learnable? Or is it just something that we possess? You know, I'm gonna, so drawing back from this model of everybody, I guess we all know about this ecological model of agency, whether agency is possessed or achieved, that says agency is achieved. I would say we relate to emotion. Emotion can also be achieved. Empathy can also be achieved. Emotional sensitivity, intelligence, anything associated with that can also be achieved. We just need to know how to regulate it. We just need to know how to feel. Uh, when it comes, for example, to empathy, there's a definition that I really like. For example, no, it says that how to feel into how to feel into someone else's shoes. That's a very probably the simple but comprehensive definition of empathy. How do we feel into someone else's shoes? Yeah, we can teach and we can learn the emotion and build on that. Let me give you an example. I'm not teaching at the moment. I know I may have some kind of random and kind of one-on-one classes on language, but I used to teach a while ago. And so one of the things that I personally have a struggle was the use of teaching materials that we all had, textbooks, course books that we had, assignment sheets that we all had, and we had to do that. When I think about those, one of the things that I personally struggle was that, okay, how the material that is included in this, how the text that is included in this, lesson, how the pictures and images that are included here, how do they convey the emotions? How do they convey, the feelings of the people that these images and these conversations represent? To me, it was a very, again, back to our earlier conversation, a very binary and dichotomous, uh, picture and image of, okay, how, again, male, female should react and should know what kind of pictures they should be into, what kind of jobs they should be into. And then there was this gender kind of gap and gender disparities. In those materials, emotion probably, if there existed, emotion was taken for granted. There is no taking for granted aspect when it comes to emotion. When it comes to anything, when in education, so there always there's always some sort of development and some sort of change, and we gotta move with that. When it comes again to teaching, all we gotta do, I guess, one of the important things that we can do is that we need to feel how others, how our students, how our colleagues, whoever that we are interacting with, how do they feel? We need to put them in their shoes and then look at what we are doing. Some of the papers that I recently saw, they proposed an emotion-centered pedagogy, like identity-oriented pedagogy, like emotion-centered pedagogy. And I think that's a very nice way to look at instruction, to look at, applied linguistics research in general, and to include emotion in what we do.
Yes, wonderful conversations. I've been taking notes, and then I have a couple of reply comments on what you both have said today. And I think first is language. And like Besat said earlier, I have been a teacher since forever. 30 years now, speaking of my birthday being tomorrow. It's been 30 years. I started teaching in 1993, a little class in a little poor school in Bogota. 30 years ago, I taught my first class of English class, right? And you're teaching language, right? So you teach language. And what do you mean language? You teach English, you teach Spanish. In this case, I was teaching both Spanish and English. And then when Luis was talking about that we need to teach them, the students, the language. And it's true because we all go through different emotions in an hour, in a minute, but we don't know the language to express how I'm feeling. I know sad and happy and excited. I have like 5 words in my repertoire, I guess. But I know we go through different emotions, but they don't necessarily have the language to express it. And I think you said it today. How is that you're feeling today? And then most of the students are, I'm okay, I'm happy, or pretty much those 2 words most of the time. But I know in language education, we can go beyond and teach students, as you mentioned, teach them the language to express how they really feel, right? Like it's not always, I'm okay, I'm good, thank you, teacher, thank you, I'm good. But there are other ways to express them, but also other ways and spaces, as you mentioned, open the space in the classroom with the students that it's okay to talk about how you feel. Like I said, excited or sad or depressed or there are so many. I know there is like a chart, like a what is it, like a poster that people put on the classrooms, and people just go get up and point. I've seen it in one of the classrooms that I say, have the child and point how you feel with little happy faces. Oh, I feel like, and there are like 20. And I really like that part because sometimes students, and even myself, I don't know, sometimes I have like, feelings go through, but I don't know. I don't know how I'm feeling. I wish I could say, but I don't know. So I think number one is that to teach them explicitly the language of emotions that we lack. We don't have the language of emotions. And then the second thing that I wanted to mention in regards of what you've been talking, yes, the reason why we have this world the way it is now, violent and why not, is because as society, as humans, so to speak, we haven't been able to sort of control that relation between powers and emotion. But I don't want to go into that route. But what I do want to say is that, yes, I think one way that we can do, or at least you who have been specializing in language, is provide the knowledge and the language for folks out there who can manage both the emotions and they can speak about what they said. And then the second thing that I wanted to mention and share with you is for a while I have engaged or talked to indigenous communities both in North America and Latin America, and to examples, at least in North America, they have this idea that the reason why we have the world in the way we have today is because the fabric, the social fabric has been damaged, so to speak. And then we need to restore it or mend it. Imagine that you're sewing, we need to sew it back to how it was. And then we need to provide that language for students and peers to be able to express their feelings and emotions so we can all repair what is being ripped in a sense. And indigenous communities in Latin America and Colombia, there is one indigenous community who talk about the table, like imagine the world or our lives as a table with legs. And then what's happening today is there's one leg that is missing. And our job as society is to try to put the leg back and repair it so we can have a balance, as you mentioned, to try to find that balance. And I guess some of the work that we have done and I have done throughout so long in terms of social justice is try to find that balance, try to provide the language for our students so they can manage and their emotions, and they can go through their emotions, they can be free to express their emotions, they can find schools and classrooms that are open to express themselves. And that's what I'm taking today in this sort of part of the conversation that I appreciate for all of us to create those spaces and carving spaces for students to talk about their emotions and use the language so they can speak about it.
And yes, thank you for mentioning that. You just reminded me of two topics. The first one, there is this Mark Brackett, Permission to Feel is the name of the book. It's a longer title, but Permission to Feel, Unlocking Emotions, something like that. I recommend that book. He has a big table of different emotions, and from pleasant, unpleasant, like it's, and it talks about this idea of the fact that we're language teaching, we're all about vocabulary, building vocabulary, but our vocabulary about emotions is so poor, socially speaking, because we know the basic emotions, but I don't know, and I've taught elementary, middle, high school, all grade levels, and I've even seen this with adolescents and adults, that even adolescents and adults, they get so frustrated when they're trying to express what they feel, but they don't have the vocabulary to express it. And then they get so frustrated and they get even more upset. And then they become disrupted and violent and all of these things because they do not know, they haven't been taught how to express themselves appropriately, to express how they feel. But, that just reminded me of that. But also, you were talking about indigenous communities. Yes, and of course, that's a topic very near and dear to my heart. And when I think about social emotional learning, something I was talking about earlier, social emotional learning now is becoming very big, very important in formal education. But I recommend looking at the work of Dr. Saskias Casanova and Melissa Messinas, and they talk about how social emotional learning actually originated as a form of traditional, as a way of traditionally passing knowledge within indigenous communities. It's something that they do as part of their way of knowing and way of passing information and knowledge. So, I think this is something else to consider. I know that's a different topic, but, also we should, I think, elevate indigenous education and indigenous knowledge within our conversations in academia. But, that's a little bit beyond our topic of emotions, but just wanted to throw it out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Esa, do you want anything to add to the conversation about this? Oh, so then what it means is like I'm gonna move into our last sort of part of the conversation with this research. We are all researchers. We have been doing research for a while. And in the world of research in itself, I don't know if you, but I had, and I'm saying this in the past, I had the training that as a researcher, you need to move away or stay away from your emotions and sort of trace a line in between this is me and those are my participants, and I am here observing, taking notes, collecting data, and because I want to be scientifically accurate, then I should not transpire my emotions into the others because that corrupts the data, so to speak, right? And that's one thing, and the opposite way as well. Like, don't allow your participants, could be students, could be teachers, could be administrators, could be policy, anybody that you're doing research with, is this idea that they don't affect you because you don't want to affect the data. And I'm moving away from that mindset because I don't believe in that idea of to be a good scientist, you have to remove yourself from the data and from the research, and the community is quite the opposite. You have to be more involved. And I learned this from Research is Ceremony, that book that is wonderful and dear to me. It's like my guidebook at all times. And obviously, indigenous and critical methodologies have taught me a lot to remove from that binary mindset that I cannot allow my emotion in the research project, to the point that in my research projects, I have cried a couple of times when I went in Colombia working with the teachers just because of the circumstances. The students saw me with tears and they were fine. They were okay. They were like, oh, don't worry about that, teacher. It's fine. We understand you. And then some students as well went to different triggers on the trauma and why not. And it was difficult for both of us. But then the question to me is like, does that mean that I'm less as of a scientist, less of a researcher, because I allow these things to happen from me in front of my participants and from their participants in front of me? So I wonder what your thoughts are on this idea of us as researchers allowing for emotional outbursts or emotion permeating our research. Any thoughts, lights?
Vesta, you want to go first, or you want me to go first?
You can go first, please. So.
All right. Thank you, Jesse. Thank you for. And let me just say, you just reminded me of personally. I think everybody's gonna have a different opinion, but for me, my research has always been connected to things that I hold dear in my heart. And that's why sometimes, especially when I'm presenting, there is so much data that I have collected throughout the years, and some data is just hard for me to go over because I just become a little bit emotional every time I'm reading the data, because I know the participants, I've interacted with them, so it's personal to me in a way. But I remember in IATEFL, I think it was a couple of years ago, it was in Belfast. I was presenting about social emotional learning with my ninth graders when I was still living in the US and teaching in the US. And I kind of, broke down in the middle of the presentation because I was thinking about my students, and I just couldn't hold it together anymore, and for me, my participants, the findings, it's a very personal experience for me because I engage in that in those particular research projects. When we engage in research projects, we're giving time of our lives to something hopefully that we hold dear. If not, we're just giving time of our life to something that, like, what are we doing with our life, right? We're giving time of our lives to something that we do not care for, which I don't believe in that. So, but from that perspective, 2 points that I really, really think that emotions is going to become hopefully bigger when we talk about research. The first one, what you were saying, this idea that as researchers, we have to be, objective observers, this, that, like separate yourself from research. I do not believe in that. I think we're human. Emotions are always present in our conversations, just the way it is. They, we go back to, why are we researching this? Why do we choose this topic in my dissertation and this and that? At the end of the day, it's connected to who we are. Somehow it's connected to something that connected with us. We know, the three of us, that we cannot complete a dissertation if we're not, emotionally connected to it, because how are you going to spend so much time, energy, years of your life on something that you do not feel connected to? You need to feel connected to be able to really complete that marathon, which is the dissertation. So I do think that there will be some redefinitions of how we see the researcher and the effect on emotions on the researcher, but also, like, hopefully positive conversations about the benefits of being emotionally connected to your research. The fact that because we're more aware of the situation that we're researching, the participants that we're engaging with, the reality that, and this is an ethical concern that no one talks about, but I don't see participants as data givers, like people giving data. No, I see participants as human beings. They're giving me, their stories. They're trusting me with their knowledge, their story, their experiences. So that's an ethical consideration that I have to have, the fact that they trust me. And, so that's something that we should be engaging in conversations more and more. And I think we will. But a second point that I want to talk about here, when I think about emotions in research, is artificial intelligence, which, it's becoming more and more nowadays, more pervasive in our conversations. Something I have to mention Anna Becker again, because the chapter, I cannot wait to share this chapter with everyone, but we talked about this too, Anna and I. But, something that AI does incredibly well and very, very fast is decode and make sense of numerical data very, very well. AI is not going to have a problem with quantitative studies. It's going to do it. But something that AI has limitations on and with right now is when it comes to understanding and making sense of human emotions. And I think that the more AI becomes more present in our realities as researchers, and the more we realize that AI does not really understand and cannot make sense of emotions, then it's going to go back to the researcher and how emotionally intelligent are researchers, and the researcher's emotional intelligence, and how we're able to use that or not to make sense of more complex, emotionally complex data, because AI won't be able to help us with that. AI is not programmed to do that. So I think, those are two big points that I think why emotions hopefully will become more of a topic of conversation and interest in the field, I hope.
Okay. Okay. So great point, Luis. And so that's an interesting, as researchers, that's an interesting thing to think about it. So whenever I do research, or I've been we all have been researching some topics, and that we found interesting to us. Okay. So when we are doing research, I try to ask these questions: what I'm researching, the what of the research, is this topic of the research something that I can relate to, or no, it is some random topic, and I found that Luis did that, so I want to do that, or Jesse did that, so I want to do that. No. So I try to answer this if I can relate to that, so that can be a possible area that I'm stepping into. And then I try to think of it as, okay, research is situated. We all know that research is situated, and we as researchers are an element in that situation. So we cannot say that we do not impact that research, or research does not impact us. So that rejects the notion of that objectivity and being scientific, because one way or another, there is an impact. There is a kind of, it is cyclical, I guess. And research by itself is some sort of lived experience, I believe. And when it comes to lived experiences, all of us have our own subjectivities. All of us have our own unique perceptions toward that experience, which is again part of the research, and which is going to be reflected in what we do, in what we publish, and what we advocate for. So so these are the things I personally try to stay away from it, because there is no perfectionist way to look at research. That perfectionism, again, going back to how we started this conversation, leads to that binary, leads to that, okay, I'm going to stand away. No, this is not how it works. It's like, like Luis, broke into tears while presenting the research, or you were doing your dissertation, you research, you saw teachers going through trauma. I was doing my research, and I came across at the point, okay, so this participant of my research, that person is going through a rough path in their personal life. So, and I try to empathize with that person, because otherwise I couldn't make sense of what that person was doing, and I couldn't make sense of, I don't know, the data that I collected, that I was supposed to collect from that teacher that who participated in my research. So there is this emotional bond between researcher and the researched, let's say this way. one thing that just now the AI that Luis just mentioned, I'm just gonna ask this question. Have you tried uh I don't know, I believe that everybody so far has tried ChatGPT. Have you tried ask ChatGPT to write you a kind of romantic yearly letter, something like that?
I primarily use it for Polish. It's a great strategy for learning languages, by the way. My friend recently taught me how to use it because I'm very tech, like I'm not very techy at all. So I'm very technologically challenged, I think is the correct phrase. But my friend taught me how to, like, you ask for like exercises in Polish and it gives you all of the exercises.
Yes.
So it's fantastic. Yeah, yeah.
It's fantastic, but when it comes to ask ChatGPT, for example, to write a romantic letter or to write a kind of kind, affectionate letter, or give the ChatGPT a very formal piece of I don't know something, and then ask the ChatGPT to turn it into a very affectionate letter, and the result is funny. The fact is, I believe that, like you said, Luis, it doesn't read human emotion. It does a good job with numerical data, quantitative data, but when it comes to, I don't know, things like emotion, it's it's not. Probably it's not the place to mention that now. Again, I think that many of us have watched the TV series Friends. No, Chandler Bing, Matthew Perry just passed away a couple of days ago. There is an episode there where they are going to adopt a baby, and the Joey character is supposed to write a letter. And so the guy uses thesaurus and turns a recommendation letter into something very, very funny. So that's what ChatGPT does when it comes to emotion, something very funny that you cannot make sense of it. Or so that's why we cannot, I guess, again, in human interaction, we cannot separate emotion from research or research from emotion. We are part of it, and we have some sort of impact. It has a double, it's a kind of cyclical impact on the research and the researcher.
I want to pick up on what you both are started, but we're finishing on that, the AI thing and emotions. I think that would be for another conversation at some point, the relationship between AI and emotions. But I do want to say a couple of things in that regard. One is, yes, I have tried what you say, Besa, like I try, can you write a romantic story between these? Like, so I gave them the details of how I wanted this romantic story to go. Sure enough, it took like a few seconds and created like a 1,000 word romantic story from scratch. And I know AI does it based on all the romantic stories that are available online. So they capture all of this information and is capable of coming back or coming with something. So that was part number one. The second part, another day engaging with ChatGPT, I think I was asking the AI about, like, for example, God. I think it was like, do you believe in God, or what is God, or not? And I went the rabbit hole asking questions about God and the feelings and emotions and spirituality and all of those sorts of things, like for like roughly 10, 15 minutes. And I went in the rabbit hole asking, like, I wanted to ask questions, and it was like a friend next to it, like asking the questions. Until one point, I think I went deep into this emotional thing. Not that I was emotional, but I wanted to see to what extent the AI would do it. And at one point, the AI did not stop, but it did say something along the lines, for the conversation that we're having, it looks like you're having some kind of breakdown or going through an emotional thing. Let me show you some numbers and some websites or references that you can go through in case you're going through such a rough path or something. I was like, huh. So you actually like picked up that based on all the questionings that I was going through some kind of like emotion turmoil or whatever, and it provided me with like resources like to read or pages to go in which I could just call a person and go through the and it got me thinking, imagine if this is just the beginning, based on this is not much, but imagining whatever 3, 4, 5 years from today, I believe, and again, I'm gonna leave it like that. I don't expect us to discuss it because that would be for future. And somebody, I guess, already is doing the research on AI and emotions. And that's for us actually to figure it out, whether who's doing it, how is it doing it. But it got me thinking, I think that's the future. In the future, not that far, AI will be able to be a little chatbot that we have on the side in case we feel sad. I talk to you and then you make me feel better. You know, it already happened in the example that I gave you in a sense, but I think it's just gonna fine tune these tools, and then you're gonna have like, psychology, this association or whatever. Click here in case you have. Click there is a chatbot and talk to you and talk about the emotions, right? But again, this is like food for thought for the future. I just wanted to ask last question: is there anything that you wanted to say so badly and you haven't said so far that you wanna wrap up and say something in this Capsulxs conversation? Luis, is there anything that you wanna wrap up, say something to finish today?
I hope our field just considers emotions as the next superpower in our field, because it really is. And I've been with my work with Besat, another colleague, where hopefully we'll have the space, hopefully in the future, to we're trying to propose that emotions are really the meta center of our field. But I think it is really just who we are as human beings. I was reading an article recently, and I cannot remember the name of it. I apologize, old age. But it was a fantastic article about emotions, and I know it was in a journal about emotions. I forget now the topic and the title and the title of the journal as well. But anyways, the journal, the article, one of the main points was that emotions is directly connected to who we are as human beings. We cannot separate the human from emotions, and because emotions are responses that many times responses that are beyond our control, right? So it's just emotional responses that our body has, that we have to experiences, to events, and it's just who we are as human beings. But it also connects to our field with language teaching and learning, and hopefully we'll get more into it with teaching, learning, research, and perhaps see emotions from a different light. So yes, consider emotion the next superpower. Let's go deeper into it as a field. I think that would be fantastic, but from different perspectives as well.
Absolutely. Besar, is there anything that you want to say to wrap up today's conversation?
Yeah, two things about that AI. Yeah, you are right. We don't know what happens in 5 years from now, for example. Instead of referencing to books, watch the movie. Everybody, if anyone listens to me, watch the movie Hair. I think that is a 2013 movie, Hair. That's a very interesting movie, and that can somehow relate to the discussion of AI. But to wrap up, one thing that I am really interested to see in the field, just like Luis said, at some point, I think the field of applied linguistic language teaching research, TESOL, whatever we call it, or let's say applied linguistics, it has started with emotion, I guess. And for a long time, emotion, for some reason, either have been overlooked or kept at the sideline, and it is gaining momentum again. So early research on language and anxiety, for example, that we all read about in now the theories of language learning and teaching textbooks. So I believe that it started with emotion. And this revival, I would call it this revival of emotion research in applied linguistics, I would say it as a very good sign, because it can probably revolutionize is a very strong word, but I hope that it happens. It can revolutionize this now enterprise of language teaching and language learning. And just like you said, Luis said, meta looking at emotion as some sort of meta center. It is it is a very very comprehensive way to look at language teaching, to look at applied linguistics research, to look at teachers, and to look at learners.
All right. This is a great way to wrap up. Emotions are the superpower that we all have, and it's a superpower that makes us human. And we are in a campaign to regain that humanity by acknowledging and using the language to express our emotions. So we are on a campaign to teach the language to our students and folks out there so we can express, but also open the space for our students and our friends and our colleagues in our families to feel emotions and be able to express them safely. And that's the message that I got from you all today. And also, don't forget to watch the movie Her from Joaquin Phoenix, because you can learn something about romance as well. So I'm going to leave you with that, everybody. Thank you for being today with me. This video is going to be available on the YouTube website tomorrow. Thanks for coming. Have a wonderful rest of the day.